You're listening to the Everyday is a New Day show. Inspirational conversations with movers and shakers about moving forward and choosing to embrace a positive outlook. Now, here's your host, Kim O'Neill.
Welcome. My name's Kim O'Neill, and I'm a twice certified transformational coach, Reiki master, best-selling author, podcast host, former crime analyst, and big believer in learning from everything so you can confidently move forward in life. You can join us for the live shows most Wednesdays on Facebook at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. And now, here's today's newest awesome guest. I'm really excited to introduce today's guest to you. I have with me here Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. Welcome, Dr. Rhoberta.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I know that today's conversation is going to be centered around toxic relationships and all sorts of things that come with that. And just such a powerful conversation that I'm really excited to have you here because I know how helpful this is going to be to so many people. Before we get into that, I want to just give people a little bit of your background. So I'm going to go ahead and read your bio, and then we're going to get into the meat of the conversation. So for all those who are just getting to meet Dr. Rhoberta Shaler for the very first time, she is also known as the Relationship Help Doctor. Rhoberta Shaler, PhD, provides urgent and ongoing care for relationships in crisis. Even the United States Marines have called on her for help. Dr. Shaler particularly helps the partners, exes, and adult children of the relentlessly difficult, toxic people she calls hijackals to save their sanity and stop the crazy making. She defines hijackals as people who hijack relationships for their own purposes while relentlessly scavenging them for power, status, and control. She offers the insights, strategies, and support you need to reclaim hope, confidence, and your sanity when dealing with the constant uncertainty and jaw-dropping behaviors of hijackals in your life, at home, or at work. She is the author of, get this, 16 books, including her Hijackal ebook series, Escaping the Hijackal Trap, and Stop That's Crazy Making. She's also the host of two very popular podcasts that are listened to in more than 50 countries, titled Emotional Savvy, the Relationship Help Show, and Save Your Sanity, Help for Toxic Relationships. She has a very successful YouTube channel, and she's pretty much been everywhere you can imagine, featured in all sorts of different articles and websites and all of that. So with that said, we have the honor of being able to talk with Dr. Rhoberta Shaler today. Oh, Dr. Rhoberta, I know that you have a personal journey with this subject, and for those who don't know, will you just go ahead and get us started with, why is this your subject matter of expertise?
Well, there's a very simple reason. I was born into madness. I had two hijackal parents. Little did I know, of course, being as how that's my term, but I sure knew they weren't normal. And I'm an only child, so I was the lucky recipient of both of their attention or lack thereof. And I just knew this was very crazy making. They didn't make any sense to me, the way they behaved with each other, the way they behaved with me. I was parenting myself by the time I was 5, going, these people just don't know what they're doing. And of course the 5-year-old mind is not using that language, but I remember the feeling like just looking up at them and like, no, this is not good. And then of course, when you're raised by hijackals, you attract them in your life because you're comfortably uncomfortable with the crazy. And so I went on, of course, attracted one, married one, had children, divorced one, co-parented one, did all of that. But the thing was that as I went through that journey, Kim, when I tried to get help, when I tried to say my mother behaves this way or my father is sexually abusing me, because hijackals paint a public picture of perfection and create a private place of pain at home, when someone goes out, a child particularly, or even someone speaking about their spouse goes out in the world and says, this is what's happening at home, other people go, oh no, that's not the person I know. They don't behave like that. So after I had my PhD in psychology and I'd been working for a while and always interested in conflict management, I decided to dedicate myself to helping people understand the patterns, traits, and cycles what the implication was on their lives and on their relationships, if they were raised by one or they'd been in a relationship one, and to help them understand their next best steps to heal and transform their lives.
I can't imagine having more than one in your life at the same time, especially as a child and then being your parents. Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy making, to a degree, because you don't know who to believe.
Right.
Right? They both need to win. They both need to be right, and you don't know who to believe.
So here you were 5 years old and you're realizing something's off. How did you start to put the pieces together and gain some clarity or answers, a piece of your sanity?
Well, I think it was music that actually did it. I told my parents when I was 5 that I wanted a piano. And when I was 7, a piano arrived in our home, and my mother, bless her heart, said, "All right, we've rented you a piano, Smarty. If we have to tell you to practice, it goes back." Well, I just happened to know as a child that if I could interpret those black dots on those lines on the paper, I could do that. As it turned out, I did have a gift for that. So by the time I was 9, I could sight read almost any piece of music, and music was the saving grace. And here's why. Because when you're with a hijackal parent, they're not going to validate you for who you are, what you need, what you want, what you think, none of that. The only thing a hijackal parent validates you for is making them look good. So for me to have talent singing and playing the piano as well as being a top student, that was all that mattered to them.
Wow. Now, I know you have coined the term hijackals, which is brilliant. Will you share with us a little bit more about why you use that term versus some others?
Yes, because I got very concerned, Kim, that people were going off to the Google goddess, looking things up, and they're saying, my partner or my mother or my boss behaves this way, and then they forget that Google is not a psychological professional. Google is an index. So when Google spits back psychological terms, that's not helpful. I mean, it may get you started on the right path to look at something. But if you say, all right, my partner is a narcissist or my partner is a sociopath, you start distancing yourself from the fact that you are there condoning and enabling the behaviors. So I wanted people to not be concerned about a diagnosis because it doesn't matter. Hijackals are not going to go and get one unless they go to prison or a hospital because they're perfect. Why would they? So they're not going to get a diagnosis. So what's helpful? What's helpful is to recognize the patterns, traits, and cycles, how it plays out, what the impact on your life is. So I developed the term so we would have a way to talk about them without psychological implications of diagnosis.
What are some of those signs and symptoms?
Well, one of the big things is that if you ever know one, you will know that they have to win. They always have to win. They always have to be right, and you, therefore, always have to be wrong. So it may be subtle, it may be overt. Have you ever had a person, Kim, maybe there's somebody new that you're learning about, and you're going along in a conversation and you think, oh, I agree with that. So you give voice to that and you say, oh, yeah, I think that too. And then they go sideways and they go, but really, it's not like that. And that's because as soon as you agreed, they weren't winning anymore. Big sign. So having to win is the biggest sign. The second one is what we call all or nothing thinking. That means there are no gray zones. Either you're the best thing that ever happened to them or you're the scum of the earth, but there's nothing in between. So there's the worst day of their life, the best day of their life. There are no gradations. That's the way they keep themselves, supposedly think they keep themselves safe. Another thing that is really important to notice about these folks is that they will always be finding fault with you. That is kind of keeping you at bay, right? If they can find fault with you all the time. Another big one is when someone does or says something and in your inner dialogue, you say, who does that? Who says things like that? And if you have that reaction, that's what I call the incredulity reaction. And be very, very careful of those people. They love to create uncertainty and chaos and keep themselves in charge of manipulating the situation to satisfy their own needs.
Now, some people are very creative or manipulative with how they go about their hijackal behavior. And will you share with us, what it looks like to be I'm going to say covert hijackal versus overt?
Oh, yes. And covert hijackals are sneaky. These are the victims. These are the people who say, oh, well, no one ever cares what I think. Or, you run the relationship. I'm never taken into account for what I need and want. Nobody ever cares about me. That was my father. I'm sick, I'm unwell, but nobody cares. So they're covert, they're subtle, and they're very passive. Now, one thing we need to know, Kim, is all hijackals are passive aggressive, whereas not all passive aggressive people are hijackals. But the covert hijackal excels at passive aggressive behavior.
Okay. I have so many things I could ask you. I kind of have to figure out what's the best next question. Now, I know for a lot of people, it can be very confusing at first when they find themselves in a relationship with someone they would consider to be a hijackal, especially if they didn't grow up with, a pattern of being in relationship with these people. So for that person who's having that experience later on in their life for the very first time, do you have any thoughts about that type of a situation?
Yes, because here's what happens. You're a good person. You are a well-meaning person. You're an empathic person. You have empathy for other humans, which hijackals don't. And so you think, oh, well, this person just needs to be nurtured. This person needs to be validated. This person needs to be loved. And when I love them enough, then they will relax and they will be comfortable and they won't be on edge and they won't need to create all this chaos. Wrong. That just is a little gotcha. Oh, I got you to do what I want. I got you to try and figure it out. I got you under my control. So it's a big moment when you, as a well-meaning, loving, good person with certainly many healthy characteristics, thinks that you can love somebody out of their negative behaviors when they're a hijackal. And so you try too long. And you make yourselves small and you make yourselves, into a pretzel and then eventually into a doormat, and it still doesn't help. There's nothing left of you. You're put down, worn down, and torn down, and there you are. And that's when you start to usually become ill.
I love that you just said that. Talk about why would someone become ill in a situation like that?
Because high anxiety over time, heightened anxiety over time, fear over time, concern for who am I going to meet? Who's the person who's going to be there when I get home? Are they going to be nice? Are they not going to be nice? Are they going to put me down? What are they going to do? Any levels of chronic anxiety like that is going to have a direct effect on your autoimmune system because of your neurological programming. Ooh. So it's very important, if you find yourself getting skin rashes, or you find yourself extremely fatigued, or you have digestive difficulties, you've got muscle aches and pains, you've got things that go with autoimmune disease, make the connection if you're in a toxic relationship. In fact, there's research. Dr. Gabor Mate in Canada, he did a piece of research and he found out that women who were living in chronic anxiety from situations in their home were 9 times more likely in his research study to develop breast cancer than women who weren't.
Wow.
Startling statistic, but look at that. Then how more insidious or autoimmune symptoms,
Right.
fibromyalgia, things like that, where you go to the doctor and the doctor doesn't believe you at first because there's nothing apparently wrong with you. It's a problem with your health.
Now, once someone realizes that I'm in a toxic relationship and whatever other terms they might use for that, why would someone stay in a relationship like that?
They're hooked on hope. For many cases, the person that they met who love bombed them, who was that perfect person they'd waited for. Remember, a hijackal can read you like a book. So they get into your vulnerabilities. They learn things about you. They find out what you like, what you don't like. They are there. They're the people on the first date who will say, I don't even know you, but I know I'm going to marry you. You know, they are there. They are giving you everything you ever wanted or longed for. And they know they're doing it. So you're waiting for that person to come back. You're hooked on the hope that that's the real person and they're coming back. They don't exist and they're not coming back.
Now, okay, so this is such a, to me, such a multifaceted topic because, like you said earlier, you know, someone can be a hijackal and passive aggressive, but not necessarily all passive aggressive people are hijackals, right? You know, it could go both ways. And so I've found that defining if you're in a situation like this, a toxic relationship, you're with a hijackal, it can take really looking at all sorts of different facets of what's really going on to really paint the picture and understand for yourself what you're experiencing. And yet, even though you know you've finally been able to define what you're experiencing, it can be one of the most challenging things to really describe or explain to anybody else because it's not going to sound like what you know it is.
That's right.
Can you speak to that?
Yes. And, you know, I have one client. I have many who have been to several mental health professionals or counselors or therapists or whatever word you want to put on them. I don't think coaches should be handling this kind of thing because it's too therapeutically involved.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they'll go in, and I've got all these clients who have been to many, but nobody got it. Nobody saw it. Nobody spotted it because unless you've well steeped in this study, or you have also experienced it, which helps a lot.
Yeah.
You don't even believe that people really behave like that.
Right.
You are also a victim of the incredulity, like, oh no, they're just having a bad day. Or, oh, maybe they had a bad childhood. No, they're in it to win it right here, right now. And, you know, as you mentioned, I have 2 podcasts and a YouTube channel, and I'm often asked the questions about, are they doing it on purpose? Are they nasty on purpose? And the fact is that you have to look at their behavior. How do they behave out of the house? Are they that way at work? Well, there must be some mechanism that tells you it's not going to fly over there, but I can do it at home. So they are choosing to turn on the behavior and turn them off. Now, that doesn't mean that they have a healthy beginning that says that they understand themselves what it would be like to have a healthy relationship. They don't. They know how to mimic a healthy relationship. These people are deeply, deeply, deeply shame-based. And that's why they have to be so perfect. That's why they have to be above reproach. That's why when you tell them they do something wrong, they turn it around and say, no, it was you. They project it back on you. Because the idea of 1 nanosecond of shame would shatter them. And so they do not allow it.
Can you explain for us, you know, how do hijackals become hijacks? I mean, you started to touch on it a little bit, but I feel like there could be more to uncover there.
Sure. One main way is that they have a hijackal parent.
Okay.
Second main way is they have experienced childhood emotional neglect or had other childhood issues, right? They may have had trauma from outside at some point, and they've learned this is the only safe way to be. But the research shows that many of these pieces of the puzzle for them that make up who they are were put in place at home before the age of 24 months.
Oh, wow.
So we have we have this idea that children are not picking up things, but even pre-birth, we know that they're picking up vibrations. They're picking up a sense. They are being washed in hormones and chemicals in the womb. They are being washed in it by our words as they sleep. There's a new piece of research to say that children of domestic violence, even if it only occurred or the yelling occurred, even the yelling alone occurred when they were asleep, they are affected. It is changing their nervous system. It's changing whether or not they feel welcomed in the world, whether they feel they're safe, whether they feel they have a place, whether they're living with anxiety. I mean, all of those things happen when we're little. We don't have to have language to be afraid of people yelling or hovering over us or ignoring us altogether and leaving us to cry and cry and cry. Yeah. We respond to that. So it happens when we're little in most cases.
Okay. And if you are watching us live or on the replay, please let us know down in the comments what's helped you to be able to move beyond your hijackal experience, or if you have any questions for Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, please let us know down below, and we would love to respond and really support you at this time. Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, have you ever noticed a hijackal be able to identify, yes, I am a hijackal, or to be able to change and, I want to say, heal beyond what their situation is?
No. The fact, there is a caveat to that, Kim. Okay. A person who has been with a hijackal for too long will sometimes try to fight fire with fire, and they will have the skills that they've learned from the hijackal and try and do it. But when they get outside that relationship, they don't use it anymore because they don't need it. It was a tool set they needed. But people who actually have this, whether or not, there's only 4% of them that are considered to have it in their neural wiring at birth. Wow. So this is a learned experience. Hijackals are made, not born, generally. And so for a hijackal to say, I am a hijackal, occasionally they will, and they'll say it very proudly, and they'll say, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Oh, goodness.
Right. But hijackals don't have an interest in change. But here's the thing we all have to take into consideration. If you threaten to leave a hijackal, all of a sudden they'll change. Only for a hot minute until they think that they're safe. But they will pretend to change, and they will certainly promise to change. Now, that's only part of them. Most of them will say, I'll do what I want, and you have no say in the matter. But some of them will promise to change. So I always tell people I have clients all over the world because I work through video conferencing. So when someone approaches me and says, how should we start? I say, bring your partner. Absolutely bring your partner. Let's find out what's possible. Let's find out what's here, because I have really great hijackal radar. So let's find out what's really going on. Are they mimicking a hijackal, or are they really being hard, being a hijackal as an honest expression of themselves? And then we know how to proceed.
Wow. I can imagine, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine a lot of people would be afraid to bring their hijackal partner into a session, or is that not been the case?
No, many of them are afraid because they've been to therapists before who have, let me put a little frame on this. The hijackal who agrees to go to see a counselor or any kind of helper is going with the express intention of charming, manipulating, seducing, and exploiting that professional to their point of view, to join with them against the person who wanted them to go in the first place.
Well, I was just going to ask you a loaded question. You've already kind of answered it. I was just going to say, how do you as the professional spot it and define it? But I know you've got awesome radar. So,
well, I can answer the question because it usually takes 2 or 3 sessions. I let anybody show me who they are, whether they're a hijackal or they're not. I need to hear what they have to say. I need to hear how they say things, their perspectives, how they tell a story, all of that. And then after the second or third session, I'll say, well, here are some of the issues that I see, and I will ask each of them, what do you think your part in this issue is? And that's when the hijackal goes off like a Roman candle and says, no, it's all the other person's fault. And they're not having any of that, absolutely not having any of that. And they say, well, there are two people in the relationship, 2 points of view, 2 perspectives, 2 desires.
Right.
And the idea is that we merge those because we love each other, and we see that we need to be able to collaborate. And so let's talk about ways that we can collaborate. Well, you soon find out that there's no desire to collaborate. There may be some words. I'm interviewed so many times, and often people will say at the end of a podcast, what are your last words of wisdom? And I say this, my words of wisdom are this: A, B, B. Always believe behavior. No matter what a person says, always believe what they do. And if what they do doesn't match what they said, believe the behavior. And that's key when you're with a hijackal, because they will say anything to get rid of you, get you on their side. They will promise you almost anything, and it doesn't mean a thing.
We've spent a lot of I love this. You've already covered so much, and we're only in the first half of the show. And so I want to talk about now, really for the person who's dealing with that hijackal, about moving beyond and healing from that. And I want to start off with what might actually seem like a leap in that direction. But what about the person who finally says, enough is enough. I'm going to stand up for myself, and I'm not doing this anymore. Talk about the hijackal's reaction to experiencing a response like that.
Well, their first reaction is, oh no, I'm not going to have control over you. So they will mimic the niceness. Some of them will. The first thing that they will do is try to have power over you and say, who do you think you are? I pay the bills around here, and that's usually not the case. As they say, there's never anybody who falls in love faster than a narcissist who is unemployed. But, they will first of all try the power over routine, like, who do you think you are? How could you possibly do this? Then they will go to the poor me routine, like, oh, I don't mean to be so difficult. And they will promise things. But basically, if you're the one who's saying, I'm done, I need out of here, I need this to be very different, they're going to respond by saying, oh no, you get back here, I need to have control over you. So whether they do it by sweetness and light, or they do it by demand and a whole lot of noise, and one way or the other, the intention is the same. I don't want you to go anywhere because I would lose control over you.
I love that you just highlighted that they're not necessarily going to always have the angry response. They could have the sweetness response to it.
Oh, sure. I have a membership site, and I have Facebook groups, and people say, well, do you know, he came back and he's promising to do better. And he said that if only, I would give him some money and this and that everything would be so much better and he would go and get help. Right. Okay. You tell him to go get help first and include you in it. And then we'll talk about the other things. Now, at that moment, you find out, hey, that's not happening.
Right. What would you say is the best approach for someone wanting to get away from their hijackal?
The best approach is to be quiet. I mean, the thing is, get some help. What I tell my clients is, I'm going to help you calibrate who you are, what you want, what you need, and what your next best steps are. Once you recognize the hijackal situation, you recognize the patterns, traits, and cycles, you realize the impact on your life, on your children's lives, on your finances, on your future, then we have to make a plan. So don't say anything. Use someone like me to help you make a plan. And then we have to look at things. If there's no physical or sexual abuse, I tell my clients, don't leave. We need a plan.
Okay.
Hijackals love to hijack the finances. They love to be in control of the finances. When we start looking at the finances, I've had people who the hijackals were so charming that they've gone into places and had their spouse's name taken off the house. And the spouse didn't even know, right? Now, of course, that's illegal, but it can happen.
Right.
In that case, what happened is the hijackal went in and he told some young thing who just started in the bank, my wife is so ill, she can't even sign her name. She asked me to come in and do this. And the young thing was so charmed and all by the hijackal that she did it. And yes, she paid for it dearly, but that's what happens. And they do that. So we have to get finances in order. We have to think about the ages and stages of your children. What is the level of brain growth and development of the children? When's a good time to leave? When is a not so good time to leave? We have to have a plan. And here's why, Kim. You're angry, you're upset, you're worn down, you're torn down, you've got all of this going on. Is that the person, that you, is that the you that you want to take out of here? I hope not. You need to take an empowered, informed you out of this relationship so that when you get out, you're on your way.
Yeah.
Right? And that for the same reason, Kim, that's why I tell people, they'll say to me, they think they're so virtuous. They'll say, all I want is out. I just want to take my child and get out. And if I can just do that, he can have everything. Now, I'm speaking as though they're all males and females. That's not true. There are an equal number of male and female hijackals, but these are examples that come to mind. And this woman said to me just last week, she said, all I want is to get my child and I out of there and he can have everything. And I wrote and said, no. It doesn't work that way. She said, well, I said, what about the custody of the child? She said, well, I need the custody of the child. I said, a hijackal is not going to give you custody of the child. So there you are. Item number 1, no. It's not that simple. Right. And the thing is, if you did get out and you did get primary custody of the child, in a hot minute, they're going to be taking you to court for more custody or more money or whatever. So you must start from an equitable place in all the different aspects of leaving so that if there's going to be tug of war over things, you are in an empowered place.
I love that you support your clients. I mean, obviously, but I love that you've highlighted supporting them and taking an empowered approach. And that really brings me to the concept or the idea of identity. And the person who's been dealing with the hijackal, that person's identity, who's been worn down, so exhausted from the situation. And, I've had this experience myself and I realized, wow, I can't believe I'm being impacted in this way. And I just would love for you to just talk about that a little bit more. Is that a common theme you see with people who've dealt with hijackals, that their identity is starting to shift?
Well, their identity has been so disrupted, so worn away that they've even forgotten who they were at the beginning of the relationship. Yeah. Because it can be very subtle. I've had people whose hijackals showed their true colors 20 minutes after the wedding ceremony. Didn't even come home that night. Didn't. And I've had people who have had quite an ideal life for 2 or 3 years. And then it all started to surface. So it depends on how that's run, how much erosion of your identity there's been. So if you're of the type of person who thinks, well, I'll go the extra mile, I'll give somebody the benefit of the doubt, you tend to do that for a long time. Yeah. And as you're doing that, your needs are not being met. You are diluting your needs. You're suppressing your needs. You're not expressing your needs. And so it becomes more and more and more one-sided. And as you do that, you kind of lose a clear sense of how you'd like life to be, how you'd like to feel, because you've started to feel like you're not worth feeling good. One of the things a hijackal wants to do is to erode you to the point where you agree with his low opinion of you or her low opinion of you. Let's turn it around. There are some women, hijackals, who are so demanding. Now, we call them high maintenance, right? High maintenance. You do it my way. You bring in them a gift that's $500 and they're saying, are you kidding? Aren't I worth $5,000? I mean, there's nothing you can do to please them. They want more and more and more and more, and they give you less and less and less attention. So gentlemen, if you're listening, have you met one of those? Because that's the way that goes. So imagine if you're the provider and you're endeavoring. I had a client 2 weeks ago, a fellow, and he said, I've given her everything she ever asked for. And I said, yes, and she just asked for something more, didn't she? And that's why you're calling me. He said, yes, what do I do? Well, you've got to claw that all back. Yeah. It is not a financial arrangement. A relationship is not based on who gets the most money spent on them. And so things go sideways, and our calibration of who we are, what we're worth, what our identity is, how we should be treated, what we should be able to expect in a healthy relationship. There are 3 hallmarks of healthy relationships, Kim. Any relationship, whether it's with somebody at work or somebody down the street or the person in the bed next to you or your mother or father. If there isn't equality, reciprocity, and mutuality, there's nothing.
Totally agree with that. Wow. Okay, let's talk a little bit. You know, I'm personally a big believer that everything in life, even the awfulest of situations, can serve a purpose. That there's growth, that there's something positive that can come out of it, even if it may not look like that. And so, in speaking about toxic relationships, what might you say could be a silver lining from having had an experience such as a toxic relationship or a hijackal in your life?
It depends how you handle it. Yeah. If you are empowered, you rise above it. And I don't scratch that. I'm not going to say rise above it. If you have actually looked at what happened, you've taken it apart, you've said, this is all right with me, this isn't all right with me, I'd like to keep this behavior, I want to replace this behavior, and you've worked your way through it, that's gold, because it allowed you to look deeply at who you are, what your values are, your vision for your life, your beliefs about everything. Not just spiritual beliefs, but how the world works, how people work, how families work, how relationships work, how money works. It's caused you to look at everything. And then you can decide, what are my next most important steps? What would I like to be or achieve or move into? And that's a great gift, because you might not have woken up and really thought about that until you had felt on the edge of something really kind of dire. But for many people, they move on. They may leave the relationship or be discarded, because a hijackal loves to devalue and discard you. First of all, they idealize you, and then they devalue you, and then they discard you. And that's power. They love that. So a passive person, they will discard. And then that passive person, who's been left with usually without any money, doesn't know where to turn, doesn't know what to do, and doesn't have the support mechanisms as easily and readily available as would be best. And so they stay in victimhood, and their life becomes the story of, ain't it awful, he or she done me wrong. And that is not empowering. That is not empowering on any level, as you well know. So if people go down that road, then there's going to be no learning of any great value. But if they go on the side of what can I learn from this? What can I take from this that will make my life better? Then of course they're going to be open to getting some insights or perceptions or perspective shifts, some mindset shifts, and can be much stronger, much more wide awake, or as the kids say, woke, to what it is in relationships, right?
Yeah. Do you ever see some sort of variance in the different types of hijackal or toxic relationships people are in? This is feeling like a question I want to ask right now. Does anything come up for you when I ask that?
Well, sure. I think back when I was doing research, I don't know, I was 25 years old. I was doing research and I was working in a home for what they called at that time emotionally disturbed children. Okay, so there were a variety of children who had been badly abused and had different functioning levels emotionally. There was a little boy who, from the time he was 4, liked to kill animals, string them up, burn them while they were alive, do all kinds of things like that. This is psychopathic behavior, and that's the 4% of people who come into life hardwired to go in that direction. Now, some people who come in hardwired are so loved, so taken care of, so welcome, so wonderful, that doesn't really develop. But that's an example. If somebody were of that ilk, I mean, that is an incredibly bright, shining example of that person is not going to be healthy in any circumstance, in any relationship, is not going to fit into society.
Absolutely. Thank you. I definitely wanted to touch on that because I know that not all hijackal experiences are the same, and not all hijackals may operate in the same capacity either. So anybody who's going through a situation like this, if you're hearing Dr. Rhoberta Shaler start to describe some of the things that you've experienced, but then she describes some other things that don't quite fit. If you're looking for answers, this may still be a gold mine for you. So don't think that it has to encompass all of these things that she's describing.
No, they're all different, and they're all different intensities. And they may be, fairly passive most of the time, maybe quite a covert hijackal. I think of a couple that I worked with for quite a while. They're both very, very successful people. But the woman is successful and not hijackal in an overt way. She's just open, healthy, assertive. Okay. The fellow is very covert, very passive, and he can't, because of his upbringing, he finds it difficult to own the fact that he's been successful. And so therefore he's saying, well, if I'd had a different life, things would have been better for me. If my wife had ever allowed me to do what I wanted to do, if I'd ever been allowed to hang out with my friends, but I can't, she won't let me. And, are you kidding? I think of another example where the man was an entrepreneur and the woman was a physician, and they had a baby, and they came in to see me, and the woman was just beside herself because listening to him talk, he was saying things like, well, I can't trust her with the baby. I can't even trust her to get an accurate quote from a plumber. And I said, you do realize this woman holds lives in her hands every day in surgery. And you think at some level she cannot get a quote from a plumber? Right? So there are these behaviors where she had given her power over to this fellow because, in this case, she came from another country. She had worked very hard. And even though she was operating at high levels, professional credentials, professional standards, she still had a sense of not belonging. Wow. So she was taking this behavior from this man. Now, there's a case where we were able to turn it around and change it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, because she spoke with an accent and she came from a different country. Really underlying it was that he felt superior to her.
Okay.
And he had forgotten that she was a medical doctor, pretty smart woman. Probably knew how to look after the baby quite well.
Yeah.
But his fear and his superiority and things that had happened to him caused him to have a skewed view of the world. We were able to effect some changes there that allowed them to explore and get safe to explore together and make sufficient changes. Now, sometimes it's just sufficient changes that are required.
Okay, like what?
Well, that we don't put each other down anymore. We may have, we may have communication differences. We may have an understanding of, I don't do that. Now, the hijackal may not do it, not because they understand and have empathy, but they don't do it because they're not supposed to. They've just, right. But sometimes, because of the great deal of variance in hijackals, sometimes those things will work to a place that is okay enough.
Okay.
That's why I said earlier, Kim, that every situation has to be looked at differently.
Yeah,
it is not not a blanket thing. You don't just leave hijackals.
I love that you are really talking about the variance in it, and that you don't necessarily have to just leave. Now, what would be the circumstances for someone who it's probably in their best interest to leave?
Physical or sexual abuse. Immediately call the police. Immediately go to a doctor if you've been sexually abused. Immediately, and get a restraining order. That alerts everybody that this should not happen and cannot happen again. And then use that restraining order to get some help and to learn what your next best steps are.
And I don't mean to be repeating things, because I know we sort of touched on this earlier, but what are the typical types of excuses that you tend to hear of why someone who probably should leave doesn't?
Well, I really love him, or, she is the most exciting woman in the world. I mean, they go back to what they thought when they were love bombed. They go back to that idealized person that doesn't exist, that they fell in love with. And they keep, I really meant what I said. You're hooked on hope that that person's returning, or that was the real person. And all of these aberrant behaviors are just them having a problem. Right. No, they are a problem, and they were love bombing you before. So people say, well, I don't know if I can do it, and I could never make it on my own. Well, why do you believe that? Probably because the hijackal told you that at least 100 million times. You're incapable, you're stupid, you're dumb, you can't do anything, why would anybody be the least bit interested in you? You better stay with me because nobody else would want you. I mean, those are the kinds of messages you hear over and over again that are very disempowering. And you start to, as you asked the good question earlier, lose your identity, lose your sense of self, definitely lose any self-confidence you might have had. And then there you are. So when you say, well, maybe it'd be a good idea to leave, and they start coming back with but what about this? And I could never make it, and I can't manage without money, and all of these things. Yes, they are grave concerns. They all need to be taken into consideration. But first of all, the question has to be asked, are you living in total anxiety, and are you feeling unsafe most of the time? When you go to my website, transformingrelationship.com, you'll see that the tagline says, for when you're tired of being anxious, angry, and unsafe. And when you are tired of being anxious, angry, and unsafe, it is time to explore other options.
What do you say to the person who's trying to take the approach of, I'm trying to resolve the situation on my own and have healthy conversations and, express myself? What do you have to say about that approach and listening that may take place?
That's the moment I turn into Dr. Phil and I say, man, how's that working for you?
I love it.
Because it isn't, that makes you feel good, like I'm doing all the right things. But the question is, what is the result?
Right.
Right? If the result is not getting you what you want, then you can be doing all the right things, but you don't have the raw materials to get the result you want.
I just have to say, the reason why I really wanted you to come on this show is because I know that when I went through my own toxic relationship experience, how confusing and chaotic it was, and very painful. And for me, the word traumatic even rings true. And I just didn't realize how much I didn't know until I was in it and trying to figure out what the heck is happening and researching online voraciously. And so grateful that people like you put out so much information. And so I just really wanted to highlight that. But is that a common thing you hear from people, that how grateful they are for information like what you put out?
Yeah, Some people ask me why I do what I do, and you know what flips my skirt and floats my boat is that after all of these podcasts and over 400 videos on YouTube and everything, at least once a week, I will get a little thank you note from someone I've never heard of, never heard their name or their handle. And they'll say, I followed your podcast. I got out of my relationship. We're doing well now. Thank you.
Oh,
Something of that ilk. Or, we changed the relationship or we did this or that. But something, what really, really brings joy to my heart is when I realized that I didn't even have to know them. That the legacy of the information that's out there, which is exactly why I did it, Kim, is so that when you're up in the middle of the night and you're isolated and marginalized and you think life is just not worth living, that you will find a way to say, you are not alone. There are a lot of people experiencing this. Here's what you're experiencing, and here are some things to take small steps. If there's physical or sexual abuse, take big steps. But the rest of the time, I advocate take small steps so that you can take a step and you can stay there. You're not going to slip back. And you can take another step and get that secure. And slowly you're regaining ground in your life and empowering yourself. And that's why I think it's so delightful when people can find that information, especially in the middle of the night when they haven't slept for days.
absolutely. No, I completely agree. I've been there. I'm going to go ahead and just say, we're recording this in 2019, and I personally have seen, and maybe it's just because of my own experience, probably, but I feel like there's been an uptick in people experiencing these kinds of relationships. Do you agree?
Oh, I don't even have to think about it. The research supports it. In the first decade of this century, we saw a sizable number of diagnosed people with cluster B disorders. And that means that they rarely will go on their own. So they probably were going to prison. They were in a hospital. They had a mandated 730 psych evaluation from the court, and that's how they were diagnosed. So if there was a sizable increase in the numbers of diagnosed people, then imagine how sizable the increase in the undiagnosed. And we actually have books that talk about the narcissistic epidemic that's happening now. We have world leaders who are demonstrating this and allowing people, giving them permission to live from their dark sides and applauding. Our world is changing, and it's going in an unhealthy direction in many ways because of exactly what you said. This hijackals create children, and therefore the likelihood is that at least 50% of those children are going to have hijackal tendencies. Hijackals influence other people. All kinds of things allow this number to grow. And we have to be wise. We have to be understanding. We have to do some learning. We have to do some changing, some deep thinking, and then recognize we don't want to be one of them, and we don't want to be with one of them if they're going to continue to behave that way. We have to learn to say no. I have a new 5-day-a-week show that's coming out on YouTube in a couple of weeks, and it's called Hijackal Hacks, how you can say no to coercive control.
Nice.
So it's going to give all kinds of ways that you can say no, that's not going to work for me. No, I won't be here if that happens. But really have people understand all kinds of examples, what things mean, like gaslighting or triangulating or smear campaigns or all the things that hijackals will engage in. How do you recognize them? And when you recognize them, what should be a healthy response to them? How to know when it's time to leave and how to leave, how to choose an attorney, how to choose someone like myself to work with who's going to have the recognition of what you're going through, how to work through the court situation and get a divorce that is fair, if at all possible, how to think about child custody, how to deal with your time that you have your children in your custody, because you can't do much about when the hijackal has the children in their custody. So all of these pieces, I talk about them on the Save Your Sanity podcast a lot, but this is going to be a YouTube video show that is small increments, just 15 minutes an evening, that will give you small things to think about and small strategies to try.
Wonderful. And I'm going to ask a question that I think is kind of obvious, but would love for you to just affirm. Is it possible to heal and move beyond a toxic relationship?
Absolutely. Absolutely. However, if you are wounded and you have a big slash on your arm and it's gaping, don't think that just because you moved away from the knife, it's going to heal. You need to clean that wound. You need to know how you got that wound. You need to know how to stay safe from not having that wound again. You need to know how to tend to that wound. You need to know how to keep it healed. And then you need to know how to stay away from any other knives.
And we're at the very end of this, and I could just keep going on. Let me ask you one more question. What role would you say self-love plays in healing from a hijackal experience?
Well, the first thing that I want to do when I hear the word self-love is go, oh no.
Okay, well, I said it.
I think it's overdone. I think it's overused. I think it's not understood. I don't think it's deeply thought about. But the thing is, value yourself. Know yourself well enough. You don't have to be right. You have to be you.
Right.
Like if something doesn't sit well with me, then it's not right for me, or I need to explore it. I don't have to compare myself to someone else and say, well, the other person could put up with it, but I can't. I don't want to. I don't want it in my life.
Very good.
Give yourself the opportunity to live fully expressing you, your values, your vision, your beliefs, your purposes, and all of that. That's what I think is important. Self-awareness, self-reflection, caring enough to say, I deserve to have the life I want to create, that I have thought through. I am not doing it because someone else told me, and I'm not living up to the expectations of other humans that I don't agree with.
I love it. I want to first say thank you for being so authentic to express that you do not like that term self-love. And I also want to say everything you just described is part of my definition of self-love. So, so for you out there listening, whatever term you want to give it, she just listed a whole ton of really helpful things to support you in that healing process. And I really believe like this could be a whole part 2, and you probably have had other podcast hosts say this, but just thank you so much. This has been so chock full of insight and information, and just thank you. Thank you for what you do, Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. I really appreciate it, and I'm grateful for you being here today.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being so well prepared with such great questions, because that's how we respond to having listeners have their innate questions answered. So thanks for being a great host, Kim.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And where can our listeners go to learn more about you after this?
Well, go to my website, transformingrelationship.com. That's singular, transformingrelationship.com. You'll find a tab for my podcasts. It'll also take you to YouTube. But if you want to go to YouTube, go to For Relationship Help, HELP. That's my channel, For Relationship Help. And you're very welcome, Betty.
I was just going to say, thank you, Betty, and I completely agree. So wonderful. Thank you to Dr. Rhoberta Shaler for being here today, and thank you to you for watching today's episode, whether you were live or on the replay with us. I just want to remind you, every day is always a new day, even if it feels like you've been living the same day for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. you always have an opportunity to switch up your situation with every new moment, every new choice, and every opportunity to learn something. And even however painful it might be, there's still so much that can be learned from your situation. And there are people like Dr. Rhoberta Shaler out there that can really support you and help you strategize and come up with that plan for moving forward in a healthy, empowered way. So I want to leave you with that. And we will see you next time on the next Every Day is a New Day show. Thank you for being with us. Bye, everybody.
And that's today's show. So, what are you taking away? Let me know down in the comments wherever you listened or watched today's episode, and connect with me on Facebook on the Every Day is a New Day show and coaching page, or visit KimO'NeillCoaching.com for more info. Remember, every day is always a new day. Wherever you are today does not have to be where you are tomorrow. There is always hope, and you will always be amazing. I'll see you next time.